We knew from the start it wasn't going to be dry, it had to have humour, it had to have arcadey elements. We didn't just want it to be like a boring simulator. I remember our first meeting with Leo and Wide Productions. We got into a call with them and they kind of gave this very high level pitch of diggers in VR. Leo from Wide Productions had this epiphany that diggers in VR and how the controls work would just fit in VR.
With our experience from Sniper Elite, both Sniper Elite VR and Sniper Elite VR Winter Warrior, we had begun looking more into the VR space. So when it came to Dig VR being pitched to us as diggers in VR, immediately both Ben and Les, our studio director, grasped onto that idea and just essentially ran away with it.
During that first meeting with them, I was sat in my lounge, it was, doing work from home, and I was looking out my window and I could see a digger, actually, a very small digger, doing some work across the road from me on this driveway, digging it up. And I could see they were swapping out some of the tool heads on the diggers, and they'd just been using a bucket, and he was now switching out to a breaker to break it. So it kind of organically, at that point during that meeting, I was like, well, why don't we just build the game around a simple idea of a digger with different tool heads, and from there we could do different missions and different kind of objectives for the player.
When I got the initial design concept brief for it, I think there'd been an initial conceptual design that was built, actually in Unreal Engine, and we ended up using Unity Engine. So that was the first introduction that I had to it, and we were looking at similar games like Power Wash Simulator and those sort of very arcadey style relaxed games that you could jump into and have some fun with it.
Power Wash was a huge inspiration when it came to what we would be wanting to present to the audience.
When we first made the prototype, and everyone was feeling pretty good about it, but we didn't know if it was real, if that's what actual diggers felt like. So we went to Diggerland in Castleford, which is just down the road from us, jumped in some real diggers just to try and get a sense for it, and the guys who were there at Diggerland were like, oh, you guys have been in diggers before then, right? Because you seem to know the controls, you're doing really well. And we were just like, no, this is all just from a prototype we've made. And then at that moment, it just kind of clicked that we've got the sense of it right. So if you play Dig VR and how that works, it is one-to-one translatable with a real digger. I'm not telling people to go out and steal a real digger, but you are getting that authentic feeling from the game of what a digger feels like.
Diggers became a lot of things that people would have on their minds. We'd see posts in our Slack messages that were like people taking pictures of diggers and just going, I see them everywhere now. Even myself, whenever I was coming into the office, there's been a lot of building works around Leeds, and every time I saw a digger, I was like, oh, what are they doing over there?
So Dig VR is a sim light, as we describe it, which means that even though it's a simulation-esque game, we put a focus on gameplay and fun first.
It adds to that level of fantasy of being able to do something that you wouldn't necessarily be able to do within the real world, and it's something that players wouldn't necessarily expect to have so much fun doing as well.
As well as the bucket for digging, we have a circular saw for cutting down trees, we have a trimmer for vegetation, hedgerows, grass. We have an auger for drilling holes, we have a compactor for flattening out the areas that you've dug, then there's a few silly ones as well, like a bowling ball on a string.
There's a lot of content in Dig VR. We really went for it, and we've got this full campaign in there, which is about 7 to 8 hours of gameplay. We've also got a variety of mini games in there. We've got multiplayer in there, so you can play with friends. Over 70 customization options. You've got different paints, different skins, different decals, so you can fully customize your diggers, and then you can take those online and show your friends all your customizations you've unlocked. There's a lot there, a lot to dig into.
In Dig VR we have a diggable terrain, which is an existing tech, but obviously since the game is released on Quest, we needed to optimize it as much as possible because we're rendering the game on 2 screens at once, and the Quest as a device is as much powerful as a mobile phone basically. So there was a lot of magic that Chris put into this system of like dynamically scaling the resolution of the dirt where you dig and other things like that.
The terrain is quite an interesting thing because it's simulated to quite a high degree of detail, which is not that common in VR games, and we knew that there would be some performance issues with that potentially, so we had to be aware of that. And it was great fun setting up the simulation of the dirt so that it would flow and like fall into piles nicely and then flow into trenches, and getting it set up to assist gameplay as well, so that the dirt will pile up nicely when you're piling it above the ground, but when you're dumping it into trenches it will spread out better to try to fill the space.
You can make a lot of environments look very pretty in the Quest headset when they're indoors, and smaller enclosed spaces when you're in a digger, and the areas that you might be visiting in a digger very different. So that was another challenge, is how do we do open areas, fill it with all this content, and have the diggers and the deformable terrain and all the other bits that you'll be doing in the game working in tandem and actually run. So we had to make quite a lot of concessions in the art. One of the big things that we decided to do very early on was use a color swatch sheet. So instead of having the traditional route of having a 3D model, it has its own multiple textures. We just went with a very basic color swatch sheet with a range of, I think it was about 128 different colors on there that we could then color all of the 3D objects in the environment with. And slowly that started to develop a really nice sort of fun, stylized, cartoony world that we actually wanted to build upon and be in more. Well, I think we've done really well on providing quite a lot of varied places to go to and varied objectives to do, which is not just digging in the Dig VR game.
We can make it on our own, 'cause all we need is a little bit of rock and roll.
So it's been great to see people actually get hands-on with the game. You know, we took the project to Diggerland and we had some people actually play it where they could then jump onto real-world diggers. And the feedback's been fantastic. The way that they were able to play the game and then immediately jump into an actual digger and it kind of controls one-to-one has been really cool, because it means that as a design team we've achieved our goal of what we set out to do.
It's been a labour of love from all sides, and having that finally go out to players and letting everyone else enjoy that, that's what I'm looking forward to most. I'm feeling very ecstatic to see how people react to it.
The line we hear all the time from people who play it, they go, oh, that's not what I was expecting, in that really joyful sense that they think it's just this kind of sim, but it's got this real good heart to it and humour, and it's got the quirkiness and the fun, and people just come away with a totally different perception of what the game is, and they go, oh, I get it. And everyone who wasn't necessarily interested in the game because they just had no interest in excavators or diggers whatsoever, all of a sudden are now like, yeah, I'm going to buy this.
People that enjoy this, I'm really loving it, and I think it will be a game that will stay on the market for a long time.